What is behind these numbers? Let's break them down with Bankrate Analyst Jeff Ostrowski. Jeff, nice to have you on the program. I do want to zero in on that number one city for first-time home buyers, Austin, Texas, which Seana just mentioned. Home prices up about 30% to pre-pandemic and have essentially doubled over the last decade. How does it come in at number one in terms of first-time home buyers?
Well, that's a great question. And I was surprised as well. I don't know if I was shocked, but definitely surprised. But I think that the answer here is that we're looking at four categories and not just one. So if it were solely an affordability calculation, Cleveland would have come out at number one. But affordability was one of four factors that we looked at. The others were, as you've got on the screen, job market. And Austin ranks number one nationally in job market in terms of job growth, in terms of employment rate. And then housing market conditions. The housing market actually has slowed quite a bit in Austin. So we haven't seen prices crash, of course, but we looked at things like days on market and inventory trends. So the idea here is to just measure how easy or difficult it is for first-time buyers who are out shopping for homes. And it's gotten a lot easier in Austin. I spoke to a home buyer there who a year and a half ago was one of 30 people in line for a condo, had to bid over asking and still got shut out. And then bought last fall and was the only bidder. So that's another thing that we looked at. The Austin market, even though it's still quite pricey, has fallen a bit. And in terms of affordability, we were comparing local home prices to local wages. And so all those tech employers coming into Austin that you just mentioned have really boosted wages in Austin. So it's it's a tough market for people who are making the same wages they might have been making 5 or 10 years ago, but for the folks who are working for tech companies and are enjoying this wage growth, it's actually an achievable homeownership is an achievable thing in Austin.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, following this market, I heard many a story about people trying to buy homes in Austin, Texas, only to have someone come in and pay 20 to 30% over list price in cash as they were priced out of the market for a couple of years. Overall, when you look at the top 5, even the top 10, do you see COVID kind of changing where people want to live? And how much does remote work factor in?
I think it does definitely factor in. I mean, that's part of the reason we've been seeing the tech employers open up shop in some of these less expensive markets. I mean, Austin is certainly expensive compared to much of the rest of the heartland, but compared to California and Seattle, it's pretty affordable. But yes, that's definitely a factor. Texas has had huge in-migration, huge job growth over the past couple of years. Florida, which had a metro area in the top 5, also has seen a huge influx of people and jobs. So yes, some of these new arrivals are working for companies based locally, and others are just taking their big city paycheck to a slightly less expensive market.
Jeff, as interesting as the top 5 were, the bottom 5 may have been even more interesting. Number 46, Riverside, California. 47, San Diego, California. 48, our city, New York City, followed by Boston and Washington, D.C. Is there a mass exodus from these big coastal cities? And what is the impact down the line on those housing markets and economies?
Yeah, I don't know if it would be accurate to call it a mass exodus, but certainly, somewhat of an exodus. New York, the New York State definitely is losing population. California has lost some population, and so yes, those markets are seeing people leave. But in some ways, it might be an escape valve for those markets, because those places that you just rattled off, many of them got really expensive over the past 20 to 30 years. And we saw this just geographic divide in terms of affordability. Those markets on the screen right now were very affordable, to the point that it was really hard for most Americans to consider moving to a lot of those coastal markets. And mobility really slowed down from about the 1990s on. And so now we're seeing a change. We're seeing a lot of people leave those markets and go to some of these more affordable markets. And And so I think in some ways that might be healthy for the overall housing market. I mean, it's certainly difficult to be a first-time buyer in Austin from an affordability perspective, but there's a lot of the demand that had been driving up prices in these expensive markets is now going elsewhere, and so there might be an evening out of home prices in the coming years.
Will be interesting to follow. More than 500,000 people left California and New York in last year, deeply impacting both tax brackets. Jeff Ostrowski from Bankrate, appreciate that. Thank you, sir.